what got you interested in photography? What was the initial pull that made you want to pick up a camera?
Right. That's a very general and I see this question asked a lot and very often to all kinds of photographers. I don't know if I have a very specific answer, but I'll say this. I think I was interested. I started getting interested when I was really young. I didn't really realize it at the time. I was living in Italy. And life was very different, and I had this a couple of small cameras, the first digital cameras that you could buy for 100 euros or less, and I like composing photos, but I didn't even realize it, and it was just family things, nothing too exciting, but I think it really started when I moved to the States, because before I lived in Italy again, and then I moved to Florence when I was 18 years old to the US. I was living in Buffalo. And Buffalo, it's a pretty boring city, I'll say this. While I was in Buffalo, I wasn't too excited taking photos. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, she gifted me the first decent camera. I was a DS, which I used, throughout the years. I started Instagram, I think in 2015, 16 or something. I think it was 16, when I was on a trip in Italy. And that's when it really, I think, started to spark and got me excited. I at the time I was doing all those cliche that everyone was doing with very plain backgrounds and people against them, or nature. So nothing that I'm doing now, honestly. I was doing a lot of portraits, very casually, especially of my wife and people. And then I moved to New York City, so that's what shaped, I think, my photography and my passion. And that was 2 years ago. Years ago, I moved from Buffalo to New York for work, because that's where I got my digital marketing job. And I started photographing anything whenever I had free time. And I used to do that even before I moved. I studied in school 2.5 hours from New York City, and once in a while I used to visit just to take photos. I remember walking 5-7 miles a day, even more, just to take photos, no matter what the weather was. And once I moved, I had the opportunity to slow it down, and I tried different conditions of weather, different time, day, night, and the night theme started very casually. I think once I was in Chinatown with my wife, and I took a couple of photos, and then I edited them, and I liked the look, and I was very surprised on how they looked. The editing was very different from what I do today. At the time I was shooting with Canon 5D Mark II, which I bought on eBay for a pretty cheap price. And I liked the results, so I started doing night, and also not just because I liked it, but because of convenience, honestly, because working all day from 9 to 5, and then going out when dark was very convenient. So that's how it all started.
So I fly once a year in January. I come to New York and spend about 4 or 5 days just doing street photography. Pretty bad street photography, but street photography nonetheless. As someone that lives there, what is it about New York that makes it like the mecca for street photography?
I guess a lot of people have different answers to this, but I don't like the rush of the city. It's not what fascinates me. I like that part too, but when it comes to night photography, I like the colors. That's what draws my attention. It's not really the message, the the people that I look in my photos, it's more like feelings and emotions, and how, I see a composition in front of me, and I see that certain colors could take life. And what's special about New York City is the amount of different scenery that you can find yourself in just a matter of a few meters. Like you could walk one block to another and have tons of neons and in one area, and then go into the other block and find very blue areas and dark, and I find that very fascinating. Plus when it rains, and it's when I pretty much only shoot when it rains at night. There's other elements that I'm sure you can find in other cities, but in New York City particularly, I think it's it's very cars that move, and you got reflections on the windows and the cars and the people, puddles that reflect neons and different lights. So I definitely like reflections a lot. In all kinds of materials. So that's what I love about New York City. It's not really about the people. It's more for me about the mood of the city, when things, at night, when things slow down. And at night, things do slow down, but it's a very different vibe. I go out when it rains, not because of the rain and the if you go out at night on a clear sky day, you don't get that kind of excitement that's given from the people that run, and also I don't know, it's just so different. I think it's very different from a regular day. So that's what excites me. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. There's a wonderful cinematic quality to the color in your work. How important is the color to sort of your identity as a photographer?
Well, I'd say that if in a photo, I think color is 70% of what I look for. Whenever I look through the city and I'm walking, I look through certain elements. I know that when I edit certain colors, they will turn in one way or another. So I kind of got used to see the world, not just, with your eyes in a regular way, but, seeing also as, post production. So I've developed over, the past couple of years, these presets of mine that I use. It's not the presets that I sell. It's just that I have a set of about 10 presets that I find myself using over and over, because it's just that my eye is drawn to the same kind of colors and the same kind of scenery. So again, I know that a red neon will make not only the neon itself in a certain way when I photograph it, and then I will produce it, but then, the whole scenery around it, I know that it will change it in a way that, I want it that way. So I don't really care much if there's a person under that neon or someone who's doing something exciting behind under it. I know that, the color itself will result into something that, I like and I'm drawn naturally to.
So when you're walking around New York City, obviously you've spent a lot of time there. Does it become easier or harder to find compositions the more you know the city?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because I've thought about it for a while, and I guess it's easier, but it's also tougher after a while, because I was talking about this with my wife as well. I was saying how, I've seen certain areas of the city over and over and over, but I'm sure there's so much more to discover. And also I try to tend to go back to the places that I love, that I know there's certain elements, a shop or a neon or a corner that I know I really like and I want to explore more from different angles. So I try to go back and see if there's even, sometimes you get, surprise elements like, smoke from the street in that specific corner that you love. And, that's a surprise element. So I realize that I try to go back to the same 10, 15, areas, but there's probably so much more. So is it easier or harder? It's easier in the sense that you know where you're going and you know what you could potentially expect. Then the scene, of course, always changes with the people and the light and the conditions. But it's harder in the sense that sometimes I lack that element of surprise, 100% surprise given by, the different scenery, especially for someone like me who look for certain lights and colors. And I find those, especially into window shops or neons, I know where those are. So number one, it gets harder with the time to find new ones. Of course, I try to also visit the areas that are more convenient to me. New York City is a big city, so I could probably be on the train for an hour and a half to go to Queens from where I live. And I don't know if I'll find something good or not. That's the other thing. Sometimes you walk for hours, and on a night you want to explore new areas, you'll find one thing that's cool, and you'll get away with a couple photos. Sometimes you'll find nothing. Other times you'll find 300 great photos. So, and that's why I try to go back to certain places that I know they're good, because naturally I'm inclined to think that those places I'll find again another 100, 200 great photos in a night. That's always the goal and the idea. But also, I try to spend some time to explore new areas of the city, which, New York City is great, is probably a huge city, but sometimes it feels also small in a way.
Yeah, oh, definitely. One thing I saw quite a while back was you had an issue with someone threatening to call the police if you didn't delete an image that was either of them or that they thought was of them. Is it a common occurrence that you kind of encounter people that are a bit pissed off with what you're doing, or is that just is it generally accepted and that was just a one-off idiot?
Well, I think there's not many people like that, luckily. I think a lot of people understand the art and understand, people that are out there just to make art and have fun. So most people literally won't care. I think they're just too busy to go, to care about their lives and what they're doing rather than, what you do. So you could probably just walk around with a camera in New York City, and I've done it, and, flash people in the face, and, they won't say anything. But some people don't like that at all. And that's unfortunate. I mean, I understand it, and I totally respect it. But it's also common to see stuff like that. Again, I don't find myself doing a lot of aggressive street photography, so I don't deal with these people a lot. But sometimes you see people that, even if you're taking photos of their shop or from 10 meters away, they'll get pissed off because they just don't want to be in the photo for X reason. And then they'll threaten to call the police. I always tell people, be respectful to these kinds of, individuals who don't like their photos to be taken. But at the same time, do what you're out there to do. The greatest photographers have taken photos of people without asking, the permissions, and some of those photos made history, and you just can't recreate that, those moments and that candid moment if you ask someone for their permission. So yeah, again, respect the people, but also understand that, when people are out there, they're, they can be photographed technically, and, they shouldn't be afraid or, scared of anything.
Well, it's funny because we're obviously being filmed and photographed through surveillance pretty much constantly, but it just feels like the one time you see an individual do it, all of a sudden that tends to be the one that kicks them off.
mean, even on the internet, people don't think about it, but you're giving away so much of yourself in terms of where you live, what you like, what you shop, what all your preference. We marketers do. It's just that you don't have a face, but because you don't have a face, then I guess it's people care less.
I suppose
it's really weird.
We're moving on from the idea that we're sort of being sucked into a black hole by a government. What is your current camera setup?
I use a Fujifilm X-Pro 2 with a 28 millimeter lens. I've always been drawn to very wide lenses. When I shot with a Canon a few years ago, I had a 24 to 70 zoom lens. I liked it at the time, but then I switched to Fuji, not intentionally. Unfortunately, I lost my Canon. I was stolen from a train.
Oh, no.
So I had to buy a new camera, but the Fuji, which was the greatest investment of my life, I think, and started with the 28 millimeters. I think the actual, focal length is when you buy it is 18 millimeters. I've also bought the 50 millimeters. I've tried the 85 for street. I still own the 50 millimeters, and I use that from time to time. But my go-to lens is definitely the 28. I just love that focal length. In fact, I'm thinking about upgrading the camera, buying that focal length. One thing that I will say is that people talk about zoom and prime, and I'm a firm believer that prime lenses will teach you a lot, and will motivate you and push you to move in the scene and get the shot that you want, but moving your feet and not just your hands. Because when people use zoom lenses, they don't realize in the street photography that they're in a way being a bit lazy. They're framing something in a way that to them it's perfect, but
100%.
Yeah, if you use a prime, you have to find that shot. You have to move and react, and sometimes certain shots that you had in mind, they're just not possible, but you have to accept that and realize that you have that one focal length, and that's you gotta give 100% with that one.
Yeah, it's something that's kind of strange with, so I work in weddings and I only use primes, and I've had people say to me that a zoom gives you the option to do sort of anything within the range. And I always say, yeah, but that's working on the idea that there is a right photo to take. Whereas I think that I can take my photo as opposed to like the correct one.
Exactly. I mean, I could be sitting in a spot and take that one moment, if we could freeze the word for a second, and if I could take it, in 28, 50, 85 millimeters, it would be great. I could probably choose one over the other, and then maybe, I'd like one, I'd have more options, but it's just not, I don't know. I don't like that approach. I don't like the zoom in general. I use them myself, but I found myself, being very lazy and waiting for things to come at me when it comes to street photography rather than trying to go and get them. Plus, if you use, prime, I think you really train your eye to see the word in that focal length. And again, it helps with composition a lot, because when you use zoom, you could have very, different composition of that same spot, that same image. But, that gets confusing, because then you don't know exactly. You could do so many things of just one little scene. While if you're forced to, just the prime, that you only have that one option, that one composition, and I think it helps a lot.
Why do you think Fuji is such a popular camera system with street photographers?
Because it's fairly cheap. You could get it is cheap. If you get the X100F, it's like just a little bit above $1,000, which is incredibly cheap for a camera that delivers, that high quality. I think in my opinion, it's high quality, and I love the colors of Fuji. And a lot of people say that just the raw files and some of the profiles that they have, they're amazing. I love them. I remember shooting with a Nikon. I'm not sure what you shoot with, but personally, I hated the Nikon. I saw everything like greenish. I didn't like the colors of the people. I just hated it. Hated the menu. Canon, I did like the camera itself, but Fuji is just very intuitive, and plus the lenses are so cheap. You can get a lens for $399. When people shoot with Sony, I've seen it, and I had Canon. You're paying $1,000 for a lens, and I'm not sure if the quality to price ratio is really there, honestly. When I switched to Fuji and I paid the 28 is pretty expensive, it's $599, but then the 50 was $399. The quality I could get from that 50 millimeters, it was just outstanding in my opinion. It's simple camera, small. The lenses are small, and it's cheap. Mainly, it's cheap, I think, in my opinion. So that's why I bought it.
Do you think that the camera's size is a big factor in it being used for street photography?
Yeah, it's huge. I think it's the biggest factor. It's a huge factor. People don't consider it, and that's reason number 1,000 why I say use prime lenses, because prime lenses are naturally smaller. Some people are more inclined to buy things that have a lower aperture, f1.8, f1.5, whatever. But then the lens gets bigger, and yes, you can get that more light in your lens. But honestly, I shoot only at night with f2, and I think that's fine. And the beauty of that lens is that it's so small, and the camera is just so light. I think having your camera and the opportunity to bring your camera with you all the time, it matters more than anything else. With the Canon 5D Mark II and the zoom lens that I had, that thing was like a tank. I never went out with my camera unless, I really planned to go out to shoot photos. So I had to go home, get the camera, and go out and shoot. With the Fuji, is different. And this is why I also ended up buying a small Canon. I think it's the G5X, 5GX. I keep forgetting, but it's that really small digital camera that delivers really high quality and has a little zoom, but you can just put it in your pocket and go and take photos. Having a camera with you, it's what mattered the most over quality, absolutely over quality, 100%.
I actually wrote a question out before I knew you were a digital marketer, but it's probably quite an interesting question from both sides, for you as a marketer and for you as a photographer. I'm just curious of your opinion on sort of the Instagram craze causing people to feel pressured to have something to post on like an increasingly frequent basis.
Oh boy. So I wrote a little guide on this, and also to, share my opinion on the whole algorithm pressure. I think it's very frustrating, and I'm sure that a lot of creators share this frustration with me and with many more creators on the platform. I think it unfortunately, frequency of posting does a lot. And I've tested it. I've seen it myself. So number one, you need to understand that frequency is something that will affect your reach. And when it comes to reach, it's not that the more frequent you post, the more people you will reach, but it's also about maintaining a certain frequency. So if you're comfortable posting one time a week, post that one time a week, never fall below that. And, The unfortunate thing is that if you do fall below that, the algorithm or whatever it is will penalize you in a way. And I've seen it. It's not that because you post less, that one post had less reach, but it's just that it's incremental. For some reason, as soon as the algorithm sees that, your frequency has changed, it will, for every post, you'll reach less people. It's not the overall number. It is the overall number that changes, but it's per post number that changes as soon as you lower the frequency. And it's very frustrating because honestly, I think people should have they should create at their own time, especially if, I'm talking about street photographer, and street photographers are used to, take thousands of photos, a day, and they could have, say 50 great photos in a night. But if you're doing other things, if you're doing portraits, you need your time to create, and it's important to have that. So what I'm thinking, and what I've been thinking recently, is just that we're getting into a very ugly situation where people are willing to do anything to get likes, to get followers, to get that extra traction, because it is indeed very hard to get organically just by doing your own thing. And when it comes to Instagram, we're talking about artificial intelligence. There is an algorithm that people try to, they talk about it, and everybody seems to know how it works, but no one really know how it works. But what I can say is that this thing adapts to how people as a whole perform, and as a whole do their own business. So if out of 20 people, 18 start using bots or comment aggressively or like aggressively to be seen, then that will become the normality. And that's why it gets worse and worse and worse and worse, because people get more and more aggressive with time, and it seems that aggressiveness has become the normality. So unfortunately, it's hard to step back. I think that the only way that this can change is by Instagram changing their what's considered normal and how it should consider the mass. But this is where we're at. I think unfortunately, when I post stories, or you see all those bots that reply to your stories, this is where we live now. We see, bots that reply to your stories, bots that do this, people that, comment on every single photos that you put out just because they hope that other people will see it, or other things. So I think it's unfortunately a very small percentage of what we do and see on Instagram is really considered organic, and people don't react to a photo just because they're compelled to do it, and because they truly love it, but because they want to gain something. And it's totally understandable, but it's just tough because if you're just try to be on Instagram, taking a photo, posting it, and hoping the world will see it, it will just never happen. You have to do something. You have to try to make yourself visible. And this is why I think ads have become increasingly important, unfortunately. And it makes sense. That's Instagram ultimate goal.
Well, I think it's one of the sad things when people put the sort of desire to be received as an artist ahead of what they're creating. So they're just desperate to have something out, as opposed to really focusing on making sure that the thing they're putting out is exactly what they want to be put out. Sometimes it's just get something out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest, I found myself in that situation. I was saying, it was a time, now I slow it down, but this year, the one I was saying, every day I'm posting something because, it's consistent. I want the world to see something every day. And I was being pretty successful, but there were times where, I found myself posting something because I had to, but I didn't want to. So it's really sad. And now I've been slowing down, and unfortunately it's had a negative effect on my personal growth. But I understand it because some people maybe are frustrated with their main job, let's say, and they want to just go all in and just try to be creative and get some income out of it. But it's just that you can't do it overnight, and you can't even do it probably in a year or two. It just takes time, and the more we go forward, and the more it will be harder and harder, I think.
Can you name some cities that you'd love to go and photograph that you've never been to?
London. Never been to London. I think that's definitely on my list. I'd love to go there. And then I think top of the list is Tokyo. I've seen great photographs. I know they have great, beautiful neons. So that's what I'm really drawn to. I think Tokyo is definitely a dream for me. What's preventing me from going is partially the very long flight that I'd have to take to get there. But one day I'm sure I'll visit. But London, Tokyo, and I think that's all I have in mind for now.
I mean, it helps that you're pretty much in at least one of the top three cities in the world to be for a street photographer. This has been incredibly insightful. I'm really thankful. I actually wanted to read a quote of yours, which is one of my favorite quotes I think I've ever read. As someone that frequents New York, like I said, once a year, one of your quotes that I've read is, you can sit for 2 hours on a train and still be in New York City. And I think that's pretty much the most apt quote I've read about New York City. It's like small, but it's big. And because of the rush of people, it can be a really slow city, but feel really fast. It's a very bizarre city. What I wanted to ask you, and I think you already kind of answered this, but I want to see if there's a slightly different answer here. Earlier, you said that the rush was one of the things that you weren't keen on with New York, but what's the biggest challenge with photographing New York?
Interesting question. Biggest challenge. Try not to follow what other people are doing. I think this is general, but especially in New York City, there's a lot of great creators, and it's hard to just, focus on your own thing. It's very easy, I think, to look at around and look at other people, what other great creators are doing around here, and try to recreate and mimic the exact same thing. I think what's really hard about the city is to find your own identity and try to do something new that it's just your own thing. I think that was the struggle for me in the beginning. I used to look up to a lot of great creators and try to do the exact same thing. And I was failing miserably because, I wasn't them. When you're trying to do something that somebody else has already done, it would just be, a bad copy of them. And so that's my advice. Once you understand that, that's when you'll really start to grow, when you'll really try to do your own thing and not, follow some other people. So it's great that you have all this, a huge playground available to you, but also you kind of have to focus on what you really love and, make it happen.
What do you think is more important for a street photographer, learning technical proficiency or developing your own style?
I mean, I think when it comes to technicality, photography, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but you don't have to know all the rules and how, everything plays. You could probably go and shoot, full auto and it would work great. What's more important is to develop your style, develop your eye. And that's what takes years, and that's what differentiates someone who just started from someone who's done it for years. After a while, I think you start to see scene or colors before it happens, and that's what people should really focus on, thinking about the colors, the light, the scene, and what draws naturally their attention, not what they ideally would like to do, but realize what you're naturally drawn to, and hunt that one thing. In terms of technicality, I think if you know a couple of very simple rules, you'll be fine. I always shoot with pretty much one setting. I set my camera, go out, and I just do it, just photograph. It's I set my camera to 2 aperture, 1/60 shutter speed, and then I let my ISO oscillate between, I think, 400 to 2700. And that is about it. I don't do anything else in most of the opportunities and areas when I photograph. Sometimes I change the settings of a camera. So yeah, it's important to know how to react, because if you don't know your camera, you end up missing something, miss a shot, and that's a really bad feeling. That's normal. It always happens. But what's more important is to visualize a scene before it happens, and try to immortalize it.
What are you doing during this lockdown, this quarantine period, to kind of keep yourself inspired and keep yourself busy?
Well, I work from home. That's not very inspiring, but I have to do that full time. And then I also paint, so I'm trying to dedicate more time to that as well, because it's very convenient to just be here and be able to take a break and get some painting done.
So how does the painting work with regards to your photography? Is it what you do when you are fed up with photography and you want to take a break, or is it something you do along with the photography? How do you kind of intersplice them?
I started recently. I'd say I've been photographing less recently. Even just before the coronavirus, I think I needed a bit of a break, a mental break. So I picked up also painting as a way to, express my feelings and, compose something that's not a photo. I think the two things are very similar in a way, because the way you compose a painting is very different than the way you compose a photograph. And I do abstract painting. So, the beauty is that there you can relax and just think about the composition more than what you can do on the street. So in a way they're very opposite, but in the same way you're just looking for colors and composition. And that's also probably why I started, because again, it's about the colors. It's about putting colors together and simple things that can work well together.
It's been amazing to talk to you. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. What I want to do is make sure everyone knows where they can find your work. So if you could please just link away, tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, thank you. So you can find me on Instagram at Philip Warp, or you can also find me on YouTube. I published a couple of YouTube videos, POV, and then I have my website, www.philipwarp.com, and you can find me there. I also have a bunch of presets and guides that I sell, and people have found pretty helpful.
Again, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Everyone needs to go check out your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.